Story 1. I heard myself crying from inside my empty bedroom. Incident: a few days ago, I was sitting outside in my lawn chair with my dog. My backyard cement area where my chair was is about 1.5 yards from the exterior of my house. One of my bedroom windows was to the right of me sitting in the chair. I was reading a book, sober, adding this bit because I do smoke weed, but hadn't at this time, with my dog laying in my lap. I was startled at the sound of crying. It sounded like a woman crying, and then my brain registered that it sounded like me. I heard myself crying from my bedroom window. Once that realization set in, I froze. My blood ran cold, and I was unnerved to say the least. Shortly after, maybe a couple of minutes, I grabbed my dog and walked in my back door and made my way to my bedroom. I obviously saw nothing, y'all. I live alone. I don't know what I expected to see. Context that I think is important to know. I have a cooler in the bedroom window, and it was off. The other bedroom window was closed and locked and looks out to my wide driveway. No way it could have been anyone walking near the other window or anything like that. I recently lost my little old lady dog who I love with everything. She was my whole life since I was 13. It's been a crushing grief, so I have been crying often in my room. I live in a ranch-style house with quite a bit of space between my house and my neighbors in a quiet neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of traffic. I don't want to break the 9th rule, but think this is important to know. I am skeptically open-minded. I come from a Mexican Catholic family. Talks of brujeria are not uncommon with my folks. I am spiritual. I have my beliefs. I have my practices. I'm responsible when practicing divination. I've never experienced anything like this before. It has been a couple of days since this happened, and I have been in my room to sleep, get ready for work, etc. I haven't felt anything off while in my room, but as of a few weeks ago, I have felt a deep need to lock my bedroom door at night. I just do it and trust my instincts, and I don't think about it too much because I don't want to feel unsafe in my own space. I spend time in every other room in my house during the day/evening. I even work from home 2 days a week and am mostly a homebody. I don't feel anything off any of those times, even now as I sit in my living room at nearly midnight. I don't know what else to add. As much as I wanted to just get this off my chest and out of my mind, I'm also cautiously curious if anyone else has ever heard themselves cry in another room before or heard of something like this. Story 2. Grandfather at the end of life and interacting with deceased relatives. My grandfather is unfortunately at the end of his life, riddled with dementia and having strokes weekly. He's on hospice, and our family has made peace with his last days. He's unable to recognize any of us, and it's clear that he can no longer perceive the world around him coherently. He's mostly non-speaking now and will only grumble sometimes when he is in pain or has a primary functional need. I live very close to my grandfather and drop in regularly, although he does have a 24/7 caregiver now. Last Tuesday his caregiver called me and asked me to come over, as she smelled smoke and my grandfather was acting odd. She felt like it might be the surge, or terminal lucidity right before death. I came straight over, and as soon as I walked in, the smell of cigarette smoke hit me in the face. We have cameras on in the house at all times to check in, and none of the caregivers smoke. It smelled like an old pool hall. Sure enough, my grandfather was talking complete coherent sentences. But he wasn't talking to us, he was talking to Jack. He was talking directly to the corner of the room, giving full details about the plans for the weekend. The lawnmower he had been working on. The plan for the new pool they were going to be installing. Issues he's been having with my grandmother. This went on for 20 minutes. We would attempt to speak with my grandfather, but it was like we didn't exist. He couldn't take his eyes off of the corner of the room. The scary part for me is that Jack was a very real person, who died about 15 years ago. He was my grandfather's brother-in-law, and they were the best of buds. This, by itself, wouldn't have been that scary. But the smell. Neither of my grandparents were smokers ever. But Jack was an absolute chain smoker. He was never caught without a cigarette. And he didn't eventually pass away from lung cancer. We checked every possible option in the house that could cause smoke smell, with no avail. The smell was only in this one room, also. Not outside, not in the next room over. 30 minutes of this went by, and then it stopped. My grandfather became incoherent again, and the smell subsided. It wasn't the surge, because almost a week later he's still with us, and it hasn't happened again. I don't believe in paranormal. I like the stories, but I've never had an experience that made me a believer. But I do feel that my grandfather is somewhat on the threshold of life and death, and maybe he's able to meet some of his loved ones in the middle. Edit. I'm thankful to read the experiences all of you are sharing with me. Many people have stated this is not a paranormal phenomenon. I understand that hallucination is part of dementia, and the reason I decided to post the paranormal encounters is because of the extrasensory input that came from the smell of smoke. To me, that was what made this experience inexplainable. Final edit. Story 3. Restless Souls, Haunted Morgue. I am currently alone working a night shift at a hospital morgue. I work as a cleaner, which means I've seen, smelt, and heard horrific things. I started a year ago, but strange things have only started recently. I want to document what's happened tonight. Firstly, the porters brought a recently deceased man down to be processed into the freezers. I did the paperwork and put him into the freezer until examination tomorrow. The freezers are empty apart from this man, as the funeral home collected the rest earlier. This is important. I sat down in my office, which overlooks the freezer drawers and examination table. I started playing chess until I look up and see the door to the freezer open. I went in and shut the door, creeped out, but thinking maybe didn't shut it properly. I sat down again and continued my game of chess. I won the game around 5 minutes later, so I looked up and the freezer door was open again. I knew I locked the door, so at this point I was very creeped out. I looked around the empty hallway to check no one was there, and as I thought it was just me and a dead body, or so I thought. I locked the door again and went back to the office. I was so uncomfortable being near the room and felt like I was being stared at from the corners of the room. Suddenly a door crashed into the wall behind me like a rhino had just barraged into it. I could barely breathe from fear and grabbed for the radio to call security. I turned back to the room overlooking the examination table, and there was a woman's body on the table. I dropped the radio and screamed all the time, staring at a body that shouldn't have been there. Like I said earlier, there should be only one body here, the man's. After catching my breath, I radioed security, and they thought I was joking. About 5 minutes later, one security guard shows up confused as he looks at this body. The toe tag says died 1994 at Queen Royal Hospital. The year is 2016, in Drive Right Surgical Hospital. How is there a body from 22 years ago lying on the table? We called the police, but when we had our backs turned, the body disappeared from the table as quickly as it arrived. We both went into the room, but it was empty. I had this feeling of dread come over me as I checked the freezers. Bay 1 empty, Bay 2 empty, Bay 3 empty, Bay 4 had clothes in. The man's clothes, but he was gone. I went to tell the security guard, but he wasn't there. I looked everywhere until I tried to radio him. The radio never had any batteries in. Who was the man who showed up? Where did he go? How did he make a dead radio work? All these questions, but no answers that will ever come. After tonight, I'm never coming back. But whatever happened here tonight, it's attached itself to me. I feel more heavy, like I'm carrying someone on my back. I'm having thoughts that aren't mine. Story 4. Weird incident at my first job. I won't go into a lot of detail about what prompted me to think about this event. Mostly, I was just upset about having a bad day at work earlier. I then reflected on my first job. I worked for the local city with Public Works Department doing hazardous material cleanup. Essentially, my job was to help clean up after car crashes, among a few other smaller roles. Often, after a car crash, the aftermath is insane. Glass and debris strewn everywhere on the road. Blood staining the street. Sometimes even body parts found not too far from what mangled automobile the unfortunate victims left behind. I hated that job. One specific incident happened one Saturday morning, like early, right after dawn. I was called to come to some feeder road that led to a busy highway. At that early hour, there was almost nobody on it yet. I remember it was brutally bright outside for some reason. Maybe I had stayed out too late the night before, but I forgot my sunglasses and squinting most of the time. Anyway, as I drove up to the site of car crash, the usual scene was there. Cop cars, someone trying to direct the non-existent traffic. Then there was a guy standing next to a motorcycle. He was tall and dressed in black. Like all in black. Black dress pants, black dress shoes, and a black short-sleeved dress shirt. His shirt was the weirdest thing. It had no collar or something, from what I can recall. His bike seemed fine, but in front of it, about 20 feet ahead, was a car parked on the side. It was this really nice sports car, an older red Ferrari, I think. Super nice but old, from the 1960s or so, at least according to what I recall one of the officers saying. I parked at the side of the road behind the closest squad car. I remember, the air had this really acrid taste to it. Like some kind of fire had just happened. This happens with bad wrecks. The odd thing here though was that, at first glance, neither the motorcycle nor the car seemed burnt. I approached the car to get a quick look, which I was always nervous about. I had no idea what I would see when I came to a new wreck. A lot of times, unless they had already towed the vehicle, it would have remnants of the people in the car. Blood-soaked seats, globs of hair stuck to the partially pulled down visor, bloody hair clips. The worst were the teeth. You could find them on the road or buried in part of the dashboard. Obviously nowadays there are airbags galore in vehicles, but when this happened it was years ago. If the person wasn't buckled up in one of these older cars, the carnage was gruesome. Plus, I come from a county that is a bit poorer, so there is no shortage of older cars on the roads. After I got close to the car, I noticed a few things immediately jump out at me. One was that the front end of the car was damaged. It was obvious it hit something, but it didn't crumble like a modern car. The other thing was the inside was slightly damaged. The driver's seat was burnt, and so was part of the steering wheel. It wasn't too bad though, more like someone had dropped a cigarette, and it burnt rather than some kind of explosive fire due to the crash. Oh, and the teeth. They were there. Several lodged right into the steering wheel. I started to get to work, but a cop came over and said not to worry about it. They were going to have some forensics come in, and I would have to wait around to see if they needed me. While I waited, I saw the cop grill the dude standing next to the motorcycle. They asked him where the driver of the car was and a bunch of other things. The guy dressed in black spoke with a weird European accent and apologized about something, but he didn't seem too upset. They eventually put cuffs on him and drove him off in a squad car. Anyway, that was it. I waited around the wreck for over an hour waiting to get the go-ahead to start work. It was so bright outside. They eventually towed the car somewhere else, so I didn't have anything to do. All in all, that wreck was on the lighter side. I don't recall that they ever found the victim or the owner of the vehicle. Maybe they did, but obviously that didn't have anything to do with me at that point. I know this might not be the scariest of stories, but it's a real thing that happened to me that I just remembered and wanted to write it down. I don't know why, but of all the experiences that I had at that crappy job, that one incident is the one that stuck with me the most. Oh, one last thing that was really strange. While I was waiting, sitting there on the curb under the bright morning, one of the guys from CSI was taking photos of the car. After a bit he reached in with an instrument and pulled out one of the teeth. Once it was out, I saw the whole thing. It was the longest and sharpest tooth that I had ever seen in my life. Story 5. Unknown Creature. About 2 years ago, I was hunting in a ground blind on the edge of a field next to a running stream. On the other side of this stream is a stretch of particularly thick woods that goes steeply uphill for about 100 yards. We call this area the thicket. This property is located roughly 2 hours northeast of Atlanta, Georgia. It was still pretty early, cool and overcast, with a light misty rain, and it had so far been an uneventful hunt. About 30 minutes into my sit, I hear something coming down the hill from the thicket, walking slowly. I can tell it's a sizable animal, not a squirrel, not even a wild hog, so my mind immediately goes to deer. There are no other large wild animals in this part of the state, except for the occasional black bear, which is so rare that it's always a big local story whenever someone sees one. I've been living on this property for over 30 years and have never seen one, or any evidence of one. It gets to the edge of the water and stops. I can't look in its direction, because the side windows on my blind are closed, so as to not silhouette myself, I only keep the front window open. Everything is quiet for a moment, but about 30 seconds later, I feel something really small, about the size of an acorn, hit on the side of the blind, and roll onto the ground. I'm sitting under a small tree, so I don't think much of it. But it happens again, roughly 15 seconds later. There is no wind blowing today. These occurrences lead me to believe that something didn't fall on the blind. Something was thrown at it. I'm curious now, as to what could have caused something like this. There's no people around for miles, and there's no animal around here that can throw things, I hope. I don't have much time to continue my self-interrogation when this thing steps into the water. It takes a couple steps around, and I can hear the sound of the water sloshing around its legs as it walks. That's no deer. Curiosity gets the better of me, so I slowly stand up and quietly as I can, peel down the side window to get a look at this thing. But there's nothing there. All the sounds have stopped. The water is flowing like normal again. It's like it just flat out disappeared. I sit back down with more questions than I had before, but I'm not sitting for long when the noises start again, this time in earnest. It's splashing around, causing a fuss, and I can even hear a grunting noise this time. This thing, whatever it is making no effort to conceal its presence. When I hunt, I always carry 3 things: a knife, a 9mm handgun, and my primary rifle, a Browning X-Bolt, chambered in .300 short magnum. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, the short version is it's an extremely large and powerful bullet, with lots of kick. You could probably take down an elephant if you hit it in the right place. The reason I give you this detail is to highlight the fact that at the time of this incident, I was far from defenseless. And the more noise this animal made in the creek, the more I began to believe that my only way out of this encounter, for better or worse, was confrontation. I stand up, unzip the blind and step into the field, taking the safety off my shoulder cannon. As I round the back end of the blind, and turn towards the creek to face my assailant, I'm not sure what I was expecting to see next, but what I saw was nothing. Again. No, that's impossible, I found myself saying out loud. Nothing that big and that heavy could just vanish into thin air. What the hell is going on? At this point, I don't care how much heat I'm packing, I'm starting to get spooked. It's time to get out of the woods, and now. My RTV is parked about 150 yards away on the other side of this open field, and the house is about a mile past that. But as I turn to make good on my retreat, I can't even take one step before I hear it. Another grunt. I spin around, but still can't see it, although I can hear it crunching leaves through the thick undergrowth. And this time, I swear I can hear it breathing too. I haven't hunted that field again, and I don't plan to. Story 6. I teach dead children. I hated being a teacher and I never did like kids, but life always makes you end up doing something you hate. I hated being a high school teacher, and trying to teach a couple of youngsters who had no interest in learning is the most difficult thing to accomplish in today's age. Let's be honest, most youngsters end up being nothing important and start working a job they hate. Only a lucky few get to do something they love. I lost my first teaching job last for completely letting my temper get the better of me and really grilling a student. I used a lot of swear words, politically incorrect words, and the student mother wasn't pleased, and so I was let go. I was happy and overjoyed to be leaving that high school, but at the same time I needed a job. I wanted a career change, but my only experiences were being a teacher. Then I got an email for a job offer for teachers who hated teaching high school kids. It piqued my interest. I don't know how this strange high school got my email, but I had been applying to a lot of teaching jobs on nearly every job searching site, so they must have found it through there. I replied to their email, and I wanted to work straight away, and they set up an interview date. My interview was on a Sunday, and the school looked like any other high school. The principal really liked me, and the salary was much better than my last teaching job. Then he told me what kind of children I would be teaching, and when he told me that I would be teaching dead kids, I was completely confused. How could anyone teach dead kids? I could teach dead kids anything I wanted in any order, he told me. He also advertised how dead kids are much better well behaved and love to learn compared to your average living student. I had no idea what he was on about, but I needed a salary desperately, and my rent needed being paid as well, and I just took it. I told myself that I would just learn on the go, and he shook my hand and even hugged me. This school was desperately looking for teachers, and they had high scores from school inspections. On my first day as the new teacher, I had my timetable and my very own class. I came in early to set up my class, and when it turned 9 a.m. I was still writing on the whiteboard. I expected to hear students rushing in, jokes, jibes, and other foolery that students do, but there was just silence. When I turned around, I screamed my head off. On each desk was a dead student with the deadly mark which killed them clearly showing. Some had a knife stuck on their head, some had bullet wounds, and others had their eyes burned out, but they were somehow here. They were completely silent but staring at me, and they just somehow appeared even though I had never seen them come in. I used my common sense and just decided to waffle on about basic maths, and when the lesson was nearing to its end, I gave every student some homework. As I was walking back to my desk, the time showed that class was over, and before I could shout out that the students could leave, as I turned around, they had all disappeared with their homework. I took a break to absorb what I had experienced, and it was frightening but also quite satisfying. Never in my life as a teacher had I experienced such an easy class. Dead kids were easier to teach. I taught dead kids from different age groups and years all day long, and it was a treat once I got used to it all. I went home not stressed. The next day, when my first class began at 9 a.m., my first group of dead students appeared within a blink of an eye with their homework. Every dead student in the other years also did their homework, and I always taught them what I felt like teaching. When I marked every dead student's homework, all of them had achieved full marks apart from one, a boy who had a knife stuck in his head, and he was called James. He was in year 8, and he was clearly struggling. As time went on, and this boy James, he started to show signs that he was in pain which was coming from his head. For the first time ever since I started working in that school, I had finally witnessed some sort of emotion coming from a dead student. I asked another teacher about James, and he told me that when these dead students start failing to the bottom of the class, they start to feel the pain of their injuries. So James, being at the bottom of the class, is feeling the pain of the knife in his head now. Then the other teacher made a light joke about James, about him being bottom of the class, because the knife in his brain has reduced his cognitive skills. Then one day James couldn't take the pain anymore and was groaning, and he just fell to the floor, and blood was now coming out of his head. I called in the principal, and James had to be buried on the school field. I went home that day quite depressed, and it was on that day when the full reality of the situation really hit me. They are dead kids, and death will always be around them. I wanted to have a couple of days off to mourn James, and even though he was at the bottom of his class, he always tried his best. The principal allowed me to have a couple of days off, but warned me that some dead kids may still turn up at my house because dead kids are always eager to learn. They did in small numbers turn up at random places in my house, and thank God I am single. I recovered though, and I enjoyed teaching dead kids throughout the summer. And I was looking forward to teaching new dead kids who were going to start during the new year in September. When September arrived, I didn't expect to get a rush of live students instead of dead ones, and they were all loud and obnoxious. These kids came from rough homes where their parents didn't love them nor care for them if anything happened to them. Some of them came from another country and didn't speak English. I was confused by all of this, but I was given a note that read, around 9:30 a.m. all the teachers had to gather up in the staff room. I didn't bother teaching these live kids because I was scared that they were going to punch me in the face if I tried to make them do something. Then 9:30 a.m. came, and I rushed out into the staff room where the other teachers were saying bad things about their live high school kids. Then a group of masked men came into the school and into every classroom. I heard gunshots, stabbing sounds, and other sounds of death coming from the classrooms. Then chanting could be heard coming from the men inside the classrooms. Then these men then walked out of the classroom, and the other teachers were overjoyed that the troubled live kids were now dead. When I went into my classroom, no one was messing around or doing inappropriate things. They were dead but ready to learn. Some had knives stuck into their body, others had bullet wounds, and when the lesson ended, within a blink of an eye they all disappeared. This job is starting to get to me. Story 7. Kentucky Forest. In a small Kentucky town in the year 1972, a group of 6 friends were going on a weekend camping trip. Little did they know, this trip would lead them to the edge of a very mysterious forest. As they set up camp, strange things began to happen. The fire flickered unnaturally, and the wind sounded like eerie whispers. As they settled into the campsite, as the sun was setting, the friends noticed an abandoned cabin close to the campsite. They decided to explore it. The cabin was overrun with weeds, trees, and all sorts of vegetation that the cabin was practically hidden to the human eye. When the friends walked in, they saw an old creaky rocking chair, sitting by the fireplace, covered in dust and cobwebs. It seemed as if the chair had its own story to tell. As they explored more, the friends discovered old family photos on the walls, showing a happy family of 4 used to live there. The dad, a rugged logger, stood tall in the picture surrounded by his loved ones. The friends all walked into a separate room. In that room on a desk was a journal detailing the logger's long hours chopping down trees in the forest. There was mention of a mysterious witch that was meant to be avoided in that forest, and words wrote of strange occurrences and warnings to stay away from the witch's domain. The friends shuddered as they read about the witch with bright blue eyes who had a sinister desire for the logger's children and wife. The logger's journal described his desperate attempts to protect his family from the witch's dark intentions. The friends continued reading, eager to uncover how the logger outsmarted the witch. As they kept reading, they discovered a hidden trapdoor under a rug in the cabin. Although the trapdoor door was locked, and the friends couldn't get in, the friends' curiosity piqued. As they pondered the strange trapdoor, perhaps it led to a hidden passage where the logger stored items to fend off the witch's evil intentions. The friends' anticipation grew as they imagined the possibilities hidden beneath the trapdoor. They envisioned a cache of enchanted weapons and protective amulets, carefully crafted by the logger to shield his family from the witch's dark magic. The friends all then playfully chuckled at the thought of there even being a witch. The friends decided they had enough of the cabin and decided to go back to the campsite to relax by the campfire. They were all exchanging stories and laughing about past memories they shared together growing up, when suddenly they hear a faint eerie cackle in the distance. The sound sends shivers down their spines, exchanging nervous glances at each other as they realize the witch's laughter is growing closer, filling the night with a sense of foreboding. The friends now all huddling together, their hearts pounding as they strained to hear the witch's evil laughter growing louder in the distance. The friends begin to embrace themselves for the impending encounter with the witch, ready to face whatever challenges come the friends' way. The friends all slowly rise from their seats, their eyes scanning the dark forest as witch's laughter echoes through the night. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, making every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig feel like a potential threat. The friends, their faces lit by the dancing flames of the campfire, can feel their hearts racing as they prepare to confront the witch lurking in the shadows of the forest. The friends decided to venture into the forest, with their heads held high. As they ventured further, the sound of rustling leaves and distant whispers sent shivers down their spines. The path ahead is cloaked in mystery, and with each step the air grows colder, hinting at the presence of the witch's magic weaving through the trees. With the friends' hearts pounding and the forest whispering its secrets, the friends pressed on, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the witch's presence. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the distance, drawing them closer like moths to a flame. As they approached, an old, gnarled tree stood before them, the branches twisted into abnormal shapes. As they stood before the ancient tree, a soft ethereal glow emanates from its gnarled branches, casting a mesmerizing light that dances in the shadows. Whispers of enchantment fill the air, hinting at the presence of something mystical and otherworldly. A faint shimmering script materializes on the bark, revealing the intricate incantation of a long-lost spell. The words pulsed with magical energy. A hushed whisper carried on the wind, beckoning them to follow its melody. Shadows danced around the friends, weaving a tapestry of suspense and intrigue. Suddenly a figure cloaked in darkness emerged from the mist. It was the witch of the forest, her bright blue eyes gleaming with ancient knowledge. With a cryptic smile, she extended a gnarled hand and spoke words that sent butterflies in their stomachs. The witch's cryptic words lingering like a ghost in the air. As the moon cast a glow upon the twisted branches, a sense of foreboding hit the friends' hearts. Rustling in the undergrowth made them freeze their tracks. As the branches creaked menacingly overhead, a sense of urgency gripped the friends. With hearts pounding, they exchanged knowing glances, silently agreeing to retreat back to the safety of the campsite, an old cabin. Racing through the moonlit forest, their steps quickened, the witch's haunting presence lingering in their minds. As the friends dashed through the thick forest, the witch's shadow seemed to stretch and reach out, a reminder of the encounter they had with the witch. Heartbeats thundered in their ears as they pushed forward. That cabin beckoning like a beacon of safety in the darkness. With a final burst of speed, they stumbled into the clearing, panting but unharmed. The witch's presence may linger, but for now, they were safe within the shelter of the cabin's walls. With the witch's shadow still haunting their thoughts, they laid down next to each other, in the safety of the cabin, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The crackling campfire outside provided a flickering light against the encroaching darkness outside, casting shadows on the cabin's walls. As they exchanged nervous glances, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The friends, extremely tired, all passed out from the fear they had just experienced. With the first light of dawn filtering through the cabin's windows, a sense of unease settled upon the friends. As they roused from the restless slumber, their eyes widened in alarm to find two of their companions missing. Panic gripped their chests as they searched the cabin and its surroundings frantically, but there was no sign of the friends. With a sense of urgency, the four remaining friends swiftly packed their bags, determination etched on their faces as they embarked on the hike to the nearest ranger station. Each step through the forest, heavier, the weight of uncertainty pressing down upon them. As they reached the station, their voices trembled, as they recounted the harrowing events of the night and the mysterious disappearance of their friends. The rangers listened intently, their expressions grave, as they pledged to aid in the search of the missing companions. Hope mingled with fear within the friends, as they awaited news of the unfolding search and fate of those who had vanished into the whispering shadows of those woods. The rangers combed through the forest, their efforts yielded no trace of the missing friends, except for two hats. The discovery of the hats only deepened the mystery shrouding the disappearance, leaving the friends with a lingering sense of dread and unanswered questions. Despite the thorough search by the rangers, the forest seemed to hold its secrets close. The hats stood as silent witnesses to a puzzle unsolved, a haunting reminder of the friends lost to the enigmatic whispers of that forest. The friends gathered around once more, their hearts heavy with the weight of loss and uncertainty. They sat in silence, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying echoes of the unknown fate that had befallen their companions. Despite the darkness looming around them, a glimmer of resolve sparkles in their eyes, a silent promise to remember their friends and the bond that had united them in the face of darkness. And so, the tale of the friends lost in the forest faded into legend, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lurk beyond the edge of the known world.